He wrecked on a planet where women choose mates in combat. He never lost, until she appeared. Jax had never been defeated, not once in his entire life. As a soldier, a mercenary, and a warrior, his reputation spread far across the galaxy. He was known for his unmatched strength and deadly skills in combat. But now he was stranded on an unknown planet, his ship wrecked beyond repair, and the air thick with an unfamiliar energy. The planet was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its skies were darker than the void of space, and the ground beneath his feet felt like it was alive, shifting and pulsing as if the planet itself was watching him. He had crash-landed in a vast arena, surrounded by towering stone walls and rows of strange, glowing structures. The air was hot and dry, and the scent of something ancient lingered in the breeze. Before he could make sense of his surroundings, he was surrounded. Women. Tall, muscular, and dressed in armor that reflected the dim light, they stood before him with an air of authority. Their eyes, sharp and determined, locked onto him like prey. Jax wasn't afraid. He'd faced countless enemies across the stars, but something in their presence was different. There was an air of calm, a certainty in their movements, as if they knew something he didn't. One of them, a leader among them by the looks of her, stepped forward. She had piercing blue eyes and a face that seemed carved from stone, unyielding and proud. She spoke in a language Jax couldn't understand, but her tone was clear enough, commanding yet inviting. Without waiting for an answer, she gestured for him to follow her, and Jax found himself being led into the heart of the arena. Inside, he saw something he had never imagined. The entire city seemed to revolve around this brutal custom: combat. It was a world where women ruled, and the power to choose a mate was determined through battle. It was a place where the strongest survived, where the weak were left behind. Jax's first instinct was to resist, to escape and find a way off the planet, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was the curiosity that gnawed at him, or maybe it was the challenge he felt in the air. He had never been in a place where victory meant more than just survival. He was thrown into the arena with barely a moment's notice. His opponent, a tall woman with fiery red hair and a sword that glinted in the fading light, raised her weapon with a fierce battle cry. The crowd roared with excitement, but Jax remained calm, his focus sharp. He had fought in countless arenas before, but this one was different. The women here weren't just fighters. They were warriors bred for combat, accustomed to the harsh rules of their world. They fought not just for glory, but for the right to choose their mates. The battle was swift. Jax's opponent struck with skill and speed, but she was no match for his experience. He dodged her attacks effortlessly, his own movements precise and fluid. Within minutes, the fight was over. His opponent lay on the ground, breathing heavily but alive, as Jax stood victorious once again. The crowd erupted in applause, and Jax was escorted to the center of the arena. The leader of the women, the one who had first brought him here, stood before him, her eyes unreadable. She spoke to him again in her language, but this time Jax understood. The meaning behind her words was clear. She wanted to know if he would continue to fight. Jax had never backed down from a challenge in his life, but here, on this strange planet, he wasn't sure of the rules. What was the point of these battles? Why fight for the right to choose a mate? He had fought for money, for survival, for honor. But here, the rules seemed to change with every battle, every new opponent. Despite his confusion, Jax found himself intrigued. The women of this planet were not like those he had encountered in the galaxy before. They were fierce, independent, and powerful. In their eyes, he could see a different kind of strength, a strength that wasn't just about defeating an enemy, but about choosing one's fate. It was a concept that Jax couldn't quite grasp, but he was determined to find out more. The leader, her gaze never leaving him, finally spoke again. Her voice was softer now, almost inviting. She asked him if he would join them to prove his worth, to become part of their world. Jax didn't have an answer at first. He didn't know if he was ready to embrace their way of life, to fight for something more than survival. But then, something shifted inside him. He had faced challenges in his life, but none like this. This was a test of something deeper, something more personal. Jax was used to winning, to defeating his opponents with ease. But on this planet, he wasn't just fighting for victory, he was fighting for understanding. With a nod, he accepted the challenge, knowing that this was just the beginning. The real battle had only just begun. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, Jax felt something he hadn't felt in years: uncertainty. And for him, that was the greatest challenge of all. Jax's life on the planet grew more complicated with each passing day. After his victory in the arena, the people of the planet had begun to treat him like a legend. His name spread quickly, and with every new challenge the crowds grew larger, their expectations higher. Each fight was more brutal than the last, but Jax was unstoppable. No one could match his strength or speed. He had never lost before, and on this strange planet it seemed nothing would change. However, as the days went by, Jax started to notice something that made him uneasy. The women who fought him weren't just seeking to defeat him, they were fighting for something deeper. Each battle felt like more than just a contest of strength. It was as though they were testing something in him, trying to figure out what made him tick. Jax wasn't just a warrior to them. He was an enigma, a mystery they wanted to solve. At first, Jax brushed off the thought. He didn't care about their motives or their customs. He was here because of his shipwreck, not because of some ancient tradition. But as he fought, something inside him began to change. The women he fought were fierce, yes, but they were also determined. They didn't just want to win. They wanted to prove themselves worthy, not only as fighters, but as individuals who held the power to choose their mates. The more he fought, the more Jax realized that this planet, this culture, wasn't like any he had encountered before. There was something about the way the women held themselves, the way they fought for power and control, that intrigued him. He had always been a man of battle, of strength and strategy, but here he was learning that strength wasn't just about winning. It was about understanding, about connecting with others in a way he had never imagined. Among the women, there was one who stood out. Zara, the leader of the warriors, was unlike any of the others. She was tall and commanding, with eyes that seemed to pierce straight through him. She didn't fight like the others, as though she was seeking to prove her worth. Instead, she fought with purpose, with a calm determination that made Jax uneasy. She was a master of strategy, and Jax found himself struggling to keep up with her in their encounters. Zara had never lost in the arena. She was the undisputed champion of the planet, and everyone respected her for it. But there was something different about the way she looked at Jax. It wasn't the usual admiration or desire to defeat him. No, Zara was studying him, trying to understand him. She wasn't just impressed by his fighting skills, she was intrigued by who he was as a person. Their battles were always close. Zara would push Jax to his limits, testing him not just physically but mentally. She would provoke him, try to break through his defenses with questions and taunts, but Jax remained focused. He had fought against countless enemies, but none like Zara. She wasn't just a fighter, she was a strategist, a thinker, and Jax began to realize that she was trying to teach him something, though he wasn't sure what it was. Over time, their interactions grew more frequent, and Jax began to see a different side of Zara. She was not only a warrior, but also a leader, someone who had shaped the planet's customs with her strength and intelligence. She believed in the power of combat, yes, but she also believed in the power of choice. The women on this planet didn't just fight for victory, they fought for the right to choose, to assert control over their own destinies. One evening, after another intense battle, Zara approached Jax. This time there was no challenge, no fight in her eyes, only curiosity. She looked at him with the same intensity she had in the arena, but there was something different in her gaze. It was as if she was trying to see beyond his outer strength, trying to understand what made him tick. "You've never lost," she said, her voice low and steady. "But you're not here just to win, are you?" Jax raised an eyebrow. "I'm here to survive," he replied, his tone rough. "And if I can teach a few of you how to fight, then all the better." Zara smiled, but it was a small, almost sad smile. "Survival is only part of it. You've been fighting for so long, Jax. You fought for money, for power, for glory. But here we fight for something more." She paused, studying him closely. "We fight for the right to choose, for the right to control our own lives." Jax frowned, not fully understanding. "And you think I'm here to teach you that?" "No," Zara replied. "I think you're here to learn it. You've never had to fight for a choice before. You've always had the freedom to make your own decisions, to do what you want. But here, on this planet, we don't have that luxury. Our lives are shaped by the battles we fight, by the choices we make in combat." Jax remained silent, his mind racing. He had never thought about it that way. On Earth, he had always fought for survival, for freedom, but he had never fought for something so deeply personal, something so tied to his identity. Zara's voice broke through his thoughts. "I don't expect you to understand it right away, but I want you to think about it. Think about why you're here, why you're still fighting. Is it just for survival, or is it something more? Jax didn't answer. Instead, he turned away, his mind still processing what she had said. Zara was right. He had always fought for survival, but now, on this strange planet, it felt like there was more at stake. He was no longer just fighting for himself. He was fighting for something bigger, something he wasn't sure he was ready to face. The next few days were filled with more battles, each one more intense than the last. Jax's body was bruised and battered, but he kept pushing forward. He couldn't stop now, not when he was so close to something he couldn't understand. And then she appeared, Vera. The woman who had been spoken of in hushed tones by the others, the undefeated champion who had never lost a single battle. She was rumored to be a warrior like no other, someone who had mastered every form of combat. She had been watching Jax from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to challenge him. When Vera stepped into the arena, the crowd fell silent. There was something about her that was different, something that made Jax's blood run cold. She wasn't just a fighter, she was an embodiment of everything Jax had been fighting against. She was powerful, confident, and ruthless. And most importantly, she was undefeated. Jax met her gaze, and for the first time since he arrived on this planet, he felt fear. Not fear of losing, but fear of what this battle would mean. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, he was fighting for something far greater. Vera stepped forward, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The battle had begun, and Jax knew that this fight would be unlike anything he had ever faced before. But in the back of his mind, one thought echoed. He was no longer fighting just to survive. He was fighting for something deeper, something he had never fully understood until now. Jax stood in the center of the arena, his chest heaving as he surveyed the woman before him. Vera. She was everything the stories had claimed and more. Taller than most of the fighters he had encountered on the planet, her presence radiated an aura of calm, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her long, dark hair swayed slightly in the breeze as she stood motionless, studying Jax with a cold intensity that made his skin prickle. The crowd was silent now, all eyes fixed on the two of them. The air felt thick, charged with anticipation. Jax had faced many fighters before, but none had ever made him feel quite like this. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, as though the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for the first move. Vera stepped forward, her movements smooth and calculated. There was no rush in her steps, no unnecessary show of strength, just a quiet, unrelenting confidence. Jax's instincts screamed at him to be on guard. This was no ordinary fighter. She wasn't here to test him like the others. She was here to end him. Jax's eyes narrowed, but he remained still, waiting for her to make the first move. Vera's gaze never wavered from his, and for a brief moment, Jax wondered if she was reading him, trying to figure out what made him tick. She wasn't just a warrior, she was a strategist, and he had no doubt that she had already planned out every possible outcome of their encounter. When she finally lunged, it was with the speed of a snake striking its prey. Her movements were flawless, the fluidity of her attack so fast that Jax barely had time to react. He sidestepped just in time, narrowly avoiding her blade as it slashed through the air where his neck had been only seconds before. The crowd gasped, but Jax wasn't paying attention to them. His focus was entirely on Vera, on the woman who had just proved that she wasn't someone he could defeat with simple strength alone. He countered with a quick strike, aiming for her midsection, but Vera was already gone. She danced out of the way with a speed that was almost inhuman, and before Jax knew it, she was behind him. The tip of her blade pressed lightly against his back, a silent warning that told him just how close he had come to losing. Jax gritted his teeth, frustration rising in him. This wasn't the kind of fight he was used to. On the battlefield, he could rely on his sheer power to overwhelm his opponents, but Vera wasn't interested in brute force. She was precision, strategy, and cunning. He was being outclassed at every turn. He spun to face her again, but Vera was already moving. Her blade slashed in a wide arc, forcing Jax to raise his arm to block the attack. The force of the blow sent a jolt of pain through his arm, but he gritted his teeth and held his ground. There was no retreating here. If he ran, it would be over. He had to stand his ground and fight. They clashed again and again, each strike a test of Jax's skill, each move a reminder that he was not in control of the fight. Vera was a master, and for the first time since arriving on this planet, Jax felt the crushing weight of defeat bearing down on him. He couldn't keep up. Her speed, her technique, her sheer presence in the arena, it was too much for him to handle. Jax's mind raced, desperately searching for a way to turn the tide. He needed to change his approach, to find a weakness in Vera's perfect defenses. But the more he fought, the more he realized that this wasn't just about combat. It was about something deeper, something more personal. He had spent his life fighting for survival, for glory, for the rush of victory. But here, in this arena, surrounded by thousands of watching eyes, he was facing something else. He was fighting for something more profound, a challenge that wasn't just about strength, but about understanding. Understanding Vera, understanding the people of this planet, and understanding himself. As the battle dragged on, Jax began to see through Vera's movements, to anticipate her next strike. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He dodged another blow, and this time when he countered, he caught her off guard. His fist grazed her cheek, a hit that was more symbolic than anything. It wasn't the victory he had wanted, but it was a breakthrough. For the first time, he had disrupted her flow. Vera paused for a brief moment, her eyes narrowing as she wiped the trickle of blood from the corner of her mouth. A faint smile tugged at her lips, and for the first time since the fight had started, Jax saw something akin to respect in her eyes. "You're not like the others," she said, her voice low but clear. "You actually think, don't you?" Jax's breath came in heavy gasps, but he managed to steady himself. "I've had to," he replied. "This is not the fight I was expecting." Vera took a step back, her sword still at the ready. "Good, that's the first lesson you need to learn here. It's not about winning. It's about understanding the fight, understanding the opponent, and understanding yourself." Jax frowned, his muscles burning with fatigue. "I don't have time for lessons," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm here to survive." "You're here to survive," Vera agreed, her voice calm. "But surviving is not the same as living." For a long moment, Jax said nothing. He wasn't sure what to make of her words. The fight had become something more than just a battle. It had become a test of who he was, what he was capable of, and why he fought in the first place. As the two of them squared off again, Jax knew that this fight was far from over. It wasn't just about defeating Vera or proving that he could conquer this planet. It was about something deeper, something he had never truly considered. There was more to this planet and more to Vera than just strength and combat. As they clashed again, Jax felt something shift inside him. The fight was no longer about winning. It was about proving that he could change, that he could evolve beyond the soldier he had always been. He had spent his entire life thinking that strength was all that mattered. But now, facing Vera, he began to realize that true strength was about more than just physical power. The fight continued, each strike a lesson, each movement a test of his limits. Jax was no longer just fighting for survival. He was fighting for understanding, for the chance to break free from the chains that had always defined him. And as Vera's blade grazed his side once more, Jax realized that the true battle was not one of strength. It was a battle of the mind, of the heart. And for the first time, Jax knew that he was truly in the fight of his life. The arena was silent as Jax and Vera continued to circle each other, neither willing to give an inch. The dust that had settled on the stone floor swirled in the air with every movement they made. Jax's body was covered in cuts and bruises, his muscles aching from the relentless assault Vera had put him through. Yet, in spite of the pain, something inside him had shifted. He had stopped fighting for victory. Now it was about something else entirely. The battle had taken on a new form, one that was not just about physical strength. It had become a test of endurance, of patience, and of will. Vera had said it before, this was not about winning, but understanding. And for the first time, Jax was beginning to understand what she meant. Vera stepped back, her eyes studying him, and Jax did the same. Her stance was perfect, her breathing controlled, her focus unwavering. Jax, on the other hand, was exhausted, his movements slower than they had been at the beginning of the fight. He had never been pushed this far, never had to fight for so long without relying on his brute strength. But now he realized that the longer this battle went on, the more he was learning. "You're getting slower," Vera said, her voice calm but tinged with a hint of amusement. "You've fought well, but you're relying too much on your power. You'll never win like that." Jax didn't respond. Instead, he took a deep breath and wiped the sweat from his brow. She was right. He had been fighting with everything he had, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't just about strength. It was about adapting, about changing the way he fought, about finding a new strategy. But for Jax, change had never been easy. He had spent his whole life relying on what he knew, on the things that had worked for him in the past. He stepped forward again, this time more deliberately, less reckless. Vera's blade flashed in the sunlight as she swung at him, but Jax was ready. He blocked her strike with his forearm, the metal of his own sword grinding against hers. For a split second, he felt her power behind the blow, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he pushed forward, using his body to force her back. Vera stumbled just for a moment, and Jax saw an opportunity. He launched himself at her, moving faster than he had in the previous rounds. His fist landed on her shoulder, a strike that wasn't meant to do damage but to create an opening. Vera staggered but quickly regained her footing, her eyes narrowing with renewed intensity. "You're learning," she said, her voice low, "but it's not enough." Jax didn't answer. He had no words left. His body was exhausted, his mind working overtime to keep up with the pace of the battle. But he couldn't stop now. He was so close. He had to push further, deeper into a place where only the most skilled warriors could go. Vera attacked again, but this time Jax was ready. He anticipated her movements, saw the slight shift in her posture before she moved. As she lunged toward him, he sidestepped, his blade slicing through the air in a controlled arc. Vera blocked it just in time, but Jax could feel the tension in her movements. For the first time, he had made her react, made her adjust her strategy, and that in itself felt like a victory. But Vera wasn't going to let up. She attacked again, faster now, pressing him harder than ever. Her strikes were a blur of precision, each one designed to find a weak spot in his defenses. Jax's sword clashed against hers again and again, sparks flying as the blades met. His arms were heavy, his grip starting to falter, but he refused to give in. He couldn't. With every strike, he found himself learning more about Vera, more about the fight. She wasn't just a warrior, she was a teacher. And each time they clashed, she was showing him a different side of himself, a side that he had buried deep beneath years of combat and survival. "You're not fighting me anymore," Vera said, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "You're fighting your own limits." That's where true strength lies. Jax gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his face as he took a step back. He wasn't sure if he fully understood what she meant, but he knew that she was right. He had spent his whole life fighting to survive, to prove his strength. But now the fight had become something more. It was about pushing past his limits, about finding a new kind of strength, one that didn't rely on his physical power alone. The battle raged on, but Jax could feel something inside him shifting. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about mastering himself, about overcoming the parts of him that had always been afraid of failure, of vulnerability. And as the fight continued, he realized that Vera was not just his opponent. She was the key to unlocking something in him that he had never known existed. For the first time, he wasn't just trying to win. He was trying to understand. The two fighters circled each other again, the crowd around them a distant hum, their cheers fading into the background as the focus between Jax and Vera grew sharper. Jax's body screamed for rest, his muscles sore and bloodied from the battle, but he refused to stop. He had come too far, learned too much to back down now. Vera's eyes locked onto his as she moved in once more. This time, she was different. She wasn't just attacking to win, but to test him, to see if he had truly learned what she had been trying to teach him. And Jax knew deep down that this was the moment he had been waiting for. This was the turning point. He didn't wait for her to make the first move. Instead, he charged at her, not with blind force, but with focus, with intent. His every movement was calculated, his mind working faster than his body could keep up. He anticipated her next strike before she made it, dodging and countering with a precision he had never thought possible. Vera's eyes widened slightly as Jax's blade connected with hers, pushing her back for the first time in their battle. She was surprised but impressed. Jax had done it. He had broken through his own limitations and had started to fight on a level she had never expected. The fight wasn't over yet, but the moment had shifted. Jax was no longer the soldier who relied solely on his strength. He was something more. He was a warrior who understood the true nature of combat, of survival, and of self-mastery. For the first time, Jax smiled. And in that moment, he realized that the fight was no longer about defeating Vera. It was about defeating himself. It was about finding his true strength, not in his body, but in his mind and heart. The battle raged on, but Jax no longer feared the outcome. He was ready for whatever came next, knowing that he had already won the most important battle of all. The battle to understand. The battle had become a dance, one of careful movements, quick reactions, and intense focus. Jax could feel the weight of the fight pushing him to the limit. His body was bruised and his strength was waning. His arms were heavy from the countless clashes, but his mind was sharper than ever. The moment of clarity he had been waiting for had arrived. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting for something far greater. He was fighting to understand not just Vera, not just this strange planet, but himself. Vera's blade flashed in the sunlight again, a sharp gleam of silver as it sliced through the air. But Jax was ready. His own sword met hers with a force that sent a shock of energy through his arms. He had found his rhythm, a new kind of strength that came from within. The fight had shifted from physical to mental, and he was now matching her move for move. She wasn't holding back, and neither was he. Their blades collided again, and this time, Jax didn't flinch. He had learned the lesson she had been trying to teach him. It wasn't about the strength of your body, but the strength of your resolve. He had to trust in himself, in his mind, in his heart. And for the first time, Jax was no longer fighting to prove himself. He was fighting to connect, to truly understand what it meant to be a warrior in this world. The crowd around the arena had grown restless, their roars rising in volume as the battle reached its peak. But Jax's focus was on Vera. She was no longer just an opponent to defeat. She was a mirror, showing him parts of himself he had never truly acknowledged. Her every move spoke of years of training, discipline, and wisdom. She was more than just a warrior, she was a leader, a symbol of the very principles that define this world. The longer they fought, the more Jax understood. Vera was not just testing his skills, she was testing his heart. She wanted to know if he could overcome his own fears, if he could let go of the need to dominate, and embrace the idea of choosing not through power, but through understanding. He had been so focused on survival, on fighting to win, that he had never stopped to think about what he was fighting for. But now, in the heat of this battle, Jax realized that survival was only part of the equation. It was understanding that made the difference. Understanding the reasons behind every fight, every battle, every choice. It was about connecting with those who fought alongside you and against you. It was about making a choice, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. Jax's blade moved with fluid precision as he parried another strike from Vera. This time he didn't just react, he acted with intent. His movements were purposeful, not based on instinct alone, but on a deeper understanding of the fight. And for the first time in this entire battle, he saw something in Vera's eyes. It was a flicker of something unexpected, respect. The two of them paused for a moment, their swords locked together. Jax's chest was heaving, his body covered in sweat, but his eyes never left Vera's. There was no more aggression in her expression, no desire to defeat him. There was only the quiet realization that they had both reached the same understanding. "You've changed," Vera said, her voice steady, but her tone soft. "You're no longer fighting for yourself. You're fighting for something more." Jax didn't speak at first. He wasn't sure what to say. He had come to this planet expecting a simple fight, a way to survive and prove himself. But now, as the weight of the moment settled over him, he understood that the battle had never been about winning. It had been about learning, evolving, and understanding. "I never wanted to lose," Jax said finally, his voice quiet but resolute. "But I understand now that it's not about winning or losing. It's about knowing why you fight." Vera nodded slowly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You've learned more than I expected." With a sudden movement, she pulled her sword back, stepping away from him. Jax stood still, unsure of what would come next. But Vera didn't attack again. She lowered her weapon, her gaze meeting his with a quiet intensity. "You've passed the test," she said. "Not because of your skill in combat, but because of what you've learned in this fight. You've seen beyond the surface. You've understood what it means to choose to fight not for domination, but for understanding." Jax's heart pounded in his chest, but it wasn't fear that drove it now. It was something else, something deeper. He had come to this planet thinking that he could conquer it, that he could win over everyone with his strength. But now, standing before Vera, he knew that he had been wrong. "Then what happens now?" Jax asked, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. Vera stepped back further, her eyes still fixed on him. "Now you have a choice." A quiet hush fell over the arena as the crowd waited, breathless, for what would happen next. Jax glanced around at the people who had watched his every move, who had cheered and gasped at every strike. But for the first time, he wasn't thinking about them. He was thinking about himself, about his own journey and the choice that lay before him. Vera turned to face the crowd, raising her hand high. The murmurs from the spectators grew louder, but Jax couldn't focus on them. He was still processing everything that had happened. He had arrived on this planet as an outsider, a stranger. But now he was no longer just a fighter. He was a part of something bigger, something more meaningful. As Vera spoke to the crowd, her words were measured and strong, but Jax didn't need to listen. He already understood. This planet wasn't just about combat. It was about choice. The women here fought not to dominate, but to decide their own paths. They fought for the right to choose their mates, their futures, and their lives. And now Jax was a part of that. The fight had changed him. He had gone from an outsider, a mercenary fighting for survival, to someone who understood what it meant to be a warrior in this world. He had learned that strength wasn't just about power. It was about knowing when to fight and when to step back, when to trust others, and when to trust yourself. As Vera turned back to him, she gave him a final, approving nod. "You've earned your place here, Jax. Not as a conqueror, but as an equal." Jax looked out over the arena, his body sore and exhausted, but his heart light. He had come to this planet thinking he would fight to survive, but in the end, he had fought to understand. And now, for the first time, he knew what it truly meant to be free. The crowd erupted in applause, but Jax didn't hear it. He was no longer fighting for their approval, or for a victory he didn't need. He had already won. The battle had changed him, and in that change, he had found something far more valuable than any title or victory: peace.